Well, thank you all so much for being here. This very much feels like a celebration, and hopefully we'll all have a happy morning. I'm going to give you a 30,000-foot overview of some of the foundational aspects of the blueprint, how we're doing at implementing them, and where our most significant challenges are. And I'm hoping this provides you with a good frame to view what follows then, which will be a tour around the entire region, all 22 cities and 6 counties, and some very specific things that they have done in the last 5 years to help implement this regional vision. This is the simple version of the map of where we were going at the beginning of this century. The sort of purplish light pink area is the future footprint with what was at that point a fairly low density, classic growing outward pattern. This is the simple version of the blueprint map that the board unanimously adopted a little over 5 years ago today. You can see it's a substantially different future for where the urbanization settlement pattern in the region will be. This is an even more simplified map of that blueprint that tells, I think, a fairly simple story. That in the future, in the yellow, we'll have a fairly large urban core. It's much bigger than many people usually think of as an urban core, expands into several counties. And then you have dotting the region a number of smaller towns, cities, sometimes unincorporated areas that have become somewhat urbanized with a separation of a great deal of open space and farmland and natural resources. That's a fairly simple map to plan to at this scale. So what are some of the key building blocks? As Board Chair McBride said, people living and working closer together. These are the 3 major employment centers in the region. It's important to note that we don't have one, we have 3. They're geographically dispersed. There are many secondary employment centers that are important, dotted throughout the region, but these 3 really are the dominant centers. A key part of the blueprint is the desire to add significantly more housing near to those existing and growing employment centers. At the peak of the market 2 years ago in the downtowns of West Sacramento and Sacramento, there were 45,000 housing units in the various stages of planning, entitlement, construction, and occupancy. And while it's going to take longer for that to happen in the current economy, it will happen, and as it does, it will completely transform those downtowns. There are even more significant plans to add more housing around the Rancho Cordova and the Roseville, Rockland-centered employment areas. On the other side of the coin, we have areas in the region that are dominated with much housing and at the moment not a lot of employment or not enough employment to balance out that housing. And there are more than these 3 as well, but these stand out in Elk Grove, El Dorado County foothills, and the unincorporated areas of Yuba County. All of those members are working aggressively at plans to add employment to their housing-rich environments now, and the blueprint principles most definitely support increasing the jobs-housing balance within those areas that our members are working so hard on. What has gotten a fair amount of press in the last few days, and I think is very notable, is the dramatic change in the housing stock that is now being built in this region. When Blueprint started, the development pattern was dominated with 80% large lot single family, a traditional suburban style product. And the Blueprint wanted 70% of the new housing stock to be in a small lot single family and attached format, both rental and for sale. As you can see, that market shift has happened very dramatically. It's most definitely a confluence of market and policy initiatives. It's not just one or the other. And it is too early to conclude that this is permanent, but we do think that the demographic and the market variables that are driving this are long-term. And I do believe that over the next decades that we will see that as our dominant housing pattern. So where is the growth going? Are we starting to see a change towards more inward directed growth? We do have some evidence that that is starting to occur as well. If you look at market share for new housing over the last 4 years, the fastest growing areas of gaining market share have been in and around the employment centers in Sacramento and Roseville and Rockland. That's not definitive, but it's an indication. Just a few days ago, there was a new national study that was released from US EPA that identifies the Sacramento region as at the leading edge of a national trend of higher and higher percentages going into the core suburbs in the inner areas of the metropolitan regions around the country. One of the conclusions from Blueprint is that we cannot meet all of our future housing needs to shelter our workers just in infill development. We are going to need greenfield development, and it's going to need to be a new style of greenfield than we've had in the past. One of the key challenges we're working on is that this region is blessed with very rich natural resources, many of which are near to the urban footprint. Two of the most significant are in southwest Placer County and southeast Sacramento County, where we have very rich vernal pool complexes, and we're going to need to be very careful about how we manage that urban edge so that we can have the growth that we need for our people and preserve the wonderful natural resources that we are blessed with. One of the key vehicles to accomplish this is the habitat conservation planning that's going on throughout our region. Now, that looks like a regional map, but only the Natomas Basin has an adopted HCP. All of our member counties and many cities are working vigorously right now to get natural resource or habitat conservation plans adopted. The progress in Placer County and South Sacramento County is going to be particularly critical to succeed in order for the Blueprint growth pattern to be realized in those two fast-growing areas near two of our three big employment centers. 2 years ago, the SACOG board launched the Rural Urban Connections strategy. The goal of this is to get as knowledgeable about our rural environment as we became about our urban environment throughout the Blueprint process. What you're looking at is the kind of a rural map that most people never see. We've developed what we believe is the first in the country database of the cropping patterns on a per parcel basis throughout this region. Normally, when you look at a map like this, what you see is closer to what I showed you earlier, which is green out in the rural areas. And the risk is that urbanites and suburbanites view those areas the way the cliche goes about how New Yorkers view everything west of the Mississippi or even Hudson rivers as just out there or someplace else. And in fact, we have an incredibly diverse, rich lifestyle and economy going on in the rural areas of our region. The farm economy is a $2 billion industry in this region. And unlike nearly every other economic sector, it is growing and fairly fast in terms of economic value during this recession. The issues that we're trying to solve with the Rural Urban Connection strategy, and I'm just giving you a teaser today, we will have a major regional conference on this about mid-November this year, are simply put to find an ingredient for economic success in our rural landscapes. We're looking particularly at the transportation needs. How are those farm-to-market historical roads working? We've got a great success story in the Port of West Sacramento, building itself to be a better and better exporter of our agricultural produce that is created here. We have to look very carefully at land use patterns in the rural areas. Some of them are very damaging to the future rural landscape, and some of them hold great promise for integrating housing and urban patterns with agricultural practices. You've seen a lot lately about this linkage between rural farmers and urban consumers. It's astonishing to me that we estimate that only 2% of all the food we consume in this region is grown by our local farms. And yet they are exporting food to the rest of the country and the world. I have this image in my mind of trucks passing themselves on the freeway, taking food out and bringing food in. I think that's an area that we can do better. And there are a plethora of regulations from the local to the state to the federal level that need work. if we're going to make farming an economically viable pastime for our future farmers. So here's just quickly some of the things that we're learning about the diversity of our rural landscape. It's not all monolithic. Well, I'm going too fast here. We're blessed with very healthy commodity agriculture, people who are exporting goods to the world. The rice growers, the tomato growers, the fruit and nut growers up along the rivers, and the cattle grazers, the ranchers. We have a number of areas whose theme is open space and recreation, from the Sutter Buttes in Sutter County to the Yolo Bypass in Yolo County, the preserves in southern Sacramento County, etc. We have some places where the pattern is a blend of rural residential and small-scale agricultural uses. Sometimes this can work well, and sometimes they are very much competing and incompatible uses. That's one of the issues we're trying to work on. And we have a growing industry of small-scale farmers who specialize in serving the local markets, from Capay Valley and the far eastern end of our region to Apple Hill in El Dorado County and points in between. We think this is a potentially fast-growing sector that can help the rural economy and help our health and our happiness as we eat better and better food. I'm a basketball fan, and I like the analogy of a good basketball offense to this rural-urban issue. The people that study, that watch basketball know that the inside game is important to do well in order for the outside game, the perimeter shooters, to do well. If you have big people inside who can score, it opens up the outside so the outside people can score, and vice versa. If your jump shooters and your three-point shooters are hitting their baskets, things get a lot easier for the big people underneath. I think it's a simple but a good analogy for the rural-urban connections. We really need a thriving rural environment and economy in order for the urban infill agenda to work, and vice versa. So how are we doing on our urban infill agenda? I want to talk for a few minutes about transit priority areas. This is a new term. It's in the big statewide bill, Senate Bill 375, that Senator Steinberg sponsored. And it's where we're trying to direct a lot of our future growth. The geographic definition is any area within a half-a-mile corridor of 15-minute peak hour transit service or better. So that pinkish area that you see, those corridors, that's where we plan to have that level of transit service by 2035 in our MTP. These are the kind of projects that can benefit from building in those areas. Housing and mixed-use projects, 20 dwelling units an acre and higher, qualify for very substantial regulatory reform through CEQA. The biggest change to CEQA since the law was adopted 35 years ago. SACOG led the effort to get this part of the bill done because we wanted to put the welcome mat out to our private developers and our affordable housing builders to build in these areas that you see on the map. Currently, today, those are the only transit areas that we have 15-minute peak hour service in the ground. You can see it's not a very extensive network. Only 15% of the housing in the region today is within those areas. It's no wonder that we don't have higher transit ridership. We're not giving very many people a viable option to use transit to get to work. So those are the corridors in the future plan. And with extended transit service and a lot more housing built in those areas, our plan shows that by 2035, 42% of the people will have that kind of proximity to transit. That's 175,000 new dwelling units in those areas. That's a lot. And one of our big challenges is to move that product from a boutique product in our market to a mainstream product in our market. It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting to get there. It's important that people know these are not skyscrapers that we're asking to be built. These are pictures of products that meet this definition in terms of their location and their density today. Single-family detached products designed carefully will meet that definition and be a high-quality neighborhood. And 3 to 4 story mixed-use products. And you can see these are being built throughout the region, in the suburban areas as well as in our urban areas. We need to build lots and lots and lots of those kinds of products. On a neighborhood scale, we have miles and miles and miles of these kinds of auto-oriented corridors. We need to turn them into places that look like this. We won't do that everywhere, but we need to do this by the dozen as we go forward, not a little bit at a time. So what are some of the key challenges in making that goal a reality? One of the ones that we feel the most happy and optimistic about is market demand. We have lots of reason from studies, from demographic information, from experience on the ground, that there is a very large market for this kind of development. We, however, are very constrained on revenues for transit. We have issues with our development sector and our local governments regarding fee structures to figure out if it's really profitable to build this product en masse at a price point that people can afford to build and to own and rent. We have social issues and affordability issues to deal with. We're going to have to make sure that we have diverse neighborhoods as we do this. And zoning regulations and state and federal regulations are going to have to continue to get better in order for this to work. But why is it important? As I close, we're getting more and more performance-based in our decision-making. Vehicle miles traveled per capita today is 30% lower when you have that kind of transit proximity compared to the rest of the region. Region-wide, our new plan shows VMT per capita going down, while virtually everybody else in the country, VMT per capita is still going up. Transit trips will go up noticeably. Congested vehicle miles traveled flattens out. We very much want that green line to go down in the future, and we're not declaring victory yet until we actually see that going down. But stay with us in the next MTP, which we're just starting. We use a lot less urban land, which makes it better for the farmers and the resources. We use a lot less water. This alone is a reason to take this agenda seriously, as bad as the water problem in this state and this region is. Energy use per building goes down a similar amount, as does surface water runoff. And finally, we save $16 billion in infrastructure costs if we can build more compactly, about $20,000 per home. A $16 bill is a good thing to find even in a robust economy, but in a tough economy, it's an essential part of our future. Thank you very much.
The Sacramento Blueprint Project is the 6-county region's vision for how it will manage growth through the year 2050. Any vision relies on individual projects and plans to